The night I won the lottery should have been the happiest night of my life, but it was also the night my parents showed me exactly who they really were. My name is Lily Anderson. I'm 25 years old, and until recently, I thought my family loved me just in their own complicated way. Growing up, my parents always treated money like it was the most important thing in the world. Every decision, every argument, every celebration somehow circled back to money. My father especially believed that success could only be measured by how much you earned. But the strange thing was, he never believed I would succeed. I was the quiet child in the family. My older brother, Mark, was the golden child. He was loud, confident, and my parents bragged about him to everyone. Meanwhile, I was the one they constantly reminded to be realistic. When I was 16, I told my father I wanted to study design and work in creative media someday. He laughed, not a small chuckle, a full laugh. "Artists don't make money," he said at the dinner table. "If you want to survive in this world, you need a real job." My mother nodded like it was the most obvious truth in the universe. That moment stayed with me for years. Still, I didn't give up. I worked part-time jobs during college, saved every dollar I could, and eventually got a small position at a marketing company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And most importantly, it was mine. By the time I turned 25, I had a tiny apartment, a used car that made strange noises every morning, and just enough savings to feel slightly less terrified about the future. My life wasn't extraordinary, but it was peaceful. Then one random Thursday evening changed everything. I stopped at a small convenience store near my apartment after work. I had planned to grab a sandwich and go home, but while waiting in line, I saw the bright advertisement for the lottery jackpot, $260 million. I laughed quietly to myself. I'd never bought a lottery ticket before. It always felt like throwing money away. But that night, for some reason, I pulled out $10 and bought one ticket, just one. I remember the cashier smiling and saying, "Good luck." I thanked him, thinking nothing of it. The ticket stayed in my purse for 2 days. I didn't even check the numbers right away. Saturday morning, while drinking coffee and scrolling through my phone, I saw the news headline announcing the winning numbers. Something in my brain clicked. I grabbed the ticket from my purse and compared the numbers slowly. One number matched, then another, then another. At first, I thought I was reading it wrong. My hands started shaking. By the time I matched the final number, I felt like the air had disappeared from the room. I checked the numbers again, and again, and again. There was no mistake. I had won. Not the entire jackpot, but a massive share more money than I had ever imagined having in my entire life. I sat on my couch in complete silence for almost 20 minutes. Then I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because my brain simply couldn't process it. Everything I had worried about, rent, bills, student loans, car repairs, suddenly didn't matter anymore. For the first time in my life, money wasn't a problem. It was freedom. But that freedom lasted exactly 1 day before my parents found out. I hadn't even planned to tell them yet. I wanted time to think, to breathe, to understand what this meant for my life. But news travels fast in small communities, especially when the winner lives nearby. Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Lily," she said, "your father and I think it's time we had a family meeting." The way she said those words made my stomach tighten. My family had never held family meetings unless something serious was happening. "What kind of meeting?" I asked carefully. "Oh, nothing bad," she replied quickly. "We just want to talk about your future." My future. Something about that phrase made my chest feel heavy. Still, I agreed to come over for dinner that evening. When I arrived at my parents' house, something felt strange immediately. The dining table was already set like it was a holiday dinner. My father sat at the head of the table, unusually serious. My mother stood near the kitchen doorway, watching me carefully, and my brother Mark leaned against the wall with a smirk on his face. I had barely taken my coat off before my father spoke. "Lily," he said, folding his hands together, "we heard about your lottery situation." Lottery situation, not congratulations, not excitement, just those 2 words. My stomach sank. He continued speaking slowly, like he had rehearsed every word. "Your mother and I believe this kind of money requires family discussion. Mark chuckled quietly behind me, and suddenly, I realized something terrifying. This dinner wasn't about celebrating my good fortune. It was about deciding what my family believed they deserved from it, and the meeting hadn't even started yet. Dinner started quietly, but the silence felt heavy. My father cleared his throat and folded his hands on the table like he was about to begin a business meeting instead of a family dinner. "Lily," he said calmly, "before we talk about anything else, how much did you win?" There was no warmth in his voice, no excitement, just calculation. I hesitated for a moment. "I haven't received the money yet," I said carefully. "The process takes time." "That's not what I asked," he replied quickly. "How much?" My brother Mark leaned forward in his chair, clearly enjoying the tension. "Yeah, Lil," he added with a grin. "Are we talking millions?" The word we made my stomach twist. I took a deep breath. "It's a lot," I admitted. "More than I ever expected." My mother smiled in a way that made me uncomfortable. "That's wonderful," she said sweetly. "It means our family finally has some opportunities." "Our family?" I noticed she hadn't said your opportunity. My father nodded slowly. "Yes," he agreed. "Which is exactly why we needed this meeting." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair, looking strangely satisfied. "You're 25, he said. "You've never handled serious money before. It would be irresponsible to make decisions alone." The words felt like a slap. "I've handled my own life just fine," I replied quietly. Mark snorted. "Your tiny apartment and that dying car?" he said. "Very impressive." I ignored him and looked back at my father. "I appreciate the concern," I said, trying to stay calm. "But I'm already speaking with a financial advisor." That sentence changed the atmosphere immediately. My father's expression hardened. "You spoke to someone before talking to your family?" "Yes," I said. "Because it's my money." The room went silent. My mother's smile disappeared. My father leaned forward again, his voice suddenly colder. "Lily," he said slowly, "that money didn't come from nowhere." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," he continued, "your mother and I raised you. We supported you for 18 years. Everything you have is because of us." I felt something heavy drop in my chest. "You raised me because you're my parents," I said carefully. "Not because you expected repayment." Mark laughed. "Oh, come on," he said. "Nobody's saying repayment. But let's be realistic." He pointed at the table like he was presenting evidence. "You win millions. And suddenly you think you're completely independent?" My patience was starting to crack. "I am independent," I replied. My father raised a hand to stop the argument. "That's enough," he said. Then he looked directly at me. "We're not asking," he continued calmly. "We're planning." Planning. The word made my heart start pounding. "Planning what?" I asked. My mother reached across the table and placed a folder in front of me. "We've already spoken to someone," she said. I stared at the folder. "What is this?" "A financial structure," my father explained. "It's the smartest option for everyone." My hands felt cold as I opened it. Inside were documents outlining a family investment account. According to the plan, most of the money would be placed under joint management between my father and Mark. I looked up slowly. "You want control of the money." My father didn't even try to deny it. "Control?" he said. "No, guidance." Mark smirked again. "You're not exactly a financial genius, Lily." My chest tightened. "I never asked for guidance." My mother sighed dramatically. "We're trying to protect you," she said. "From what?" "From making a mistake," my father replied. The conversation suddenly felt less like a discussion and more like a trap. They had already made the plan. They had already assumed I would agree. My hands started shaking slightly. "I'm not signing this," I said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. My father's eyes narrowed. "Think carefully about your answer." I already did. Mark leaned forward. "You're being selfish," he said. Selfish? The word echoed in my head. I looked around the table at the 3 people who were supposed to care about me more than anyone else in the world. None of them looked happy for me. None of them looked proud. They only looked frustrated. Like I was standing between them and something they believed belonged to them. My father pushed his chair back slightly. "You're making an emotional decision," he said. "No," I replied quietly. "I'm making a logical one." For the first time all night, his voice rose slightly. You wouldn't even have this life without us. I felt something inside me snap. You mean the life where you constantly told me I'd never succeed? The words slipped out before I could stop them. My father's face darkened. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. The table went silent again. My mother looked uncomfortable. Mark rolled his eyes, but my father stood up slowly. I think, he said, adjusting his jacket, we should take a break from this conversation. Then he walked toward the living room. I watched him go, confused, but something about the way he left made me realize something strange. He wasn't angry because I refused. He was angry because he had expected me to agree, and the meeting wasn't over yet. For a few minutes after my father walked into the living room, nobody spoke. The silence at the dinner table felt heavier than any argument. My mother slowly picked up her fork and started moving food around on her plate, but she wasn't really eating. Mark leaned back in his chair, staring at me like I had just ruined his favorite movie. Finally, he sighed. You really don't get it, do you? He said. I looked at him. Get what? He shook his head, almost like he felt sorry for me. This money changes everything, he said. Not just for you, for all of us. I crossed my arms. No, I replied calmly. It changes my life. Mark laughed under his breath. You're unbelievable. My mother looked up suddenly. Lily, she said softly, why are you being so defensive? The question caught me off guard. Defensive? I repeated. Yes, she said. No one is trying to take anything from you. I slowly slid the folder across the table toward her. This document literally gives Dad and Mark control of most of the money. She glanced down at it and frowned slightly. Well, control isn't the right word. What word would you prefer? I asked. She hesitated. Management, she said finally. I leaned back in my chair. That's the same thing. Mark tapped his fingers on the table impatiently. Look, he said. You're thinking too small. I raised an eyebrow. Too small? Yes, he replied. You're acting like this is just your opportunity. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It is my opportunity. That's not how families work. He shot back. Before I could respond, my father returned to the dining room. His expression had changed. He looked calmer now. Too calm, he sat down slowly and folded his hands on the table again. I've been thinking, he said. Nobody interrupted him. Perhaps we approached this conversation the wrong way. My mother nodded quickly. Yes. That's what I was saying. I stayed quiet, waiting. My father looked directly at me. Lily, he said, this isn't about control. I didn't respond. It's about responsibility. There it was again. That word, responsibility. You suddenly have access to more money than most people see in a lifetime, he continued. That kind of power can destroy people, or help them, I said quietly. He ignored the comment. You could waste it, he said. Make emotional decisions. Trust the wrong people. My chest tightened. And you think I would do that? He hesitated. Then he said something that hurt more than I expected. You've always been naive. The word landed like a punch. Naive? I felt my throat tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. So your solution is to take control of the money? No, he said quickly. To guide it. Mark nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. My father leaned forward slightly. Think about what we could do together. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? He gestured around the room. This house, he said. It needs repairs. I blinked. You want me to renovate the house? That's just the beginning, Mark said. My father continued. Your brother wants to start a business. Mark grinned. And investors would take us seriously if we had real capital. My stomach dropped. So this meeting is about the money. My mother sighed like I was being unreasonable. It's about family support. No, I said quietly. It's about access. My father's patience finally cracked. You're twisting everything we say. I'm repeating it, I replied. Mark slammed his hand lightly on the table. Why are you acting like we're the villains here? I stared at him. Because none of you have said congratulations yet. The words hung in the air. No one spoke. Not my father, not my mother, not even Mark. And that silence told me everything. My father leaned back in his chair again, his expression slowly turning cold. Let's stop pretending this is a surprise, he said. What do you mean? You've always been distant from this family, he continued. I felt my chest tighten. That's not true, isn't it? Mark said. I looked at him. You moved out the moment you could, he continued. You barely visit, Because every visit turns into criticism. My mother looked offended. We only wanted the best for you. The best for me, I repeated quietly. My father nodded. Yes. I leaned forward slightly. Then why does it feel like you only care now that I have money? The room went completely silent again. But this time, the silence felt different, uncomfortable. My father stared at me for a long moment. Then he slowly stood up. I think we're done with dinner, he said. My mother looked confused. But dessert? I'm not hungry, he interrupted. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. For a moment, I thought he might say something else. Maybe try to fix the situation. Maybe even congratulate me. But instead, he walked toward the front door. And just before leaving the room, he said something that made my stomach sink. If you refuse to listen to your family, he said, don't expect us to help you when things fall apart. Then he walked out of the house, and the sound of the door closing echoed through the entire room. The front door slammed so hard the picture frames on the hallway wall rattled. For a moment, nobody moved. My mother stared at the doorway like she couldn't believe my father had actually left the dinner table. Mark slowly leaned back in his chair again, rubbing his forehead like the whole situation was giving him a headache. I sat there, frozen. Part of me wanted to run after my father. Another part of me felt strangely calm. The quiet stretched for almost a full minute before my mother finally spoke. I can't believe you pushed him like that, she said. I looked at her in disbelief. I pushed him? She sighed dramatically and folded her arms. Lily, your father was trying to help you. By taking control of my money? By protecting you, she insisted. Mark nodded from across the table. You made this way bigger than it needed to be, he added. I felt a small laugh escape my mouth. Neither of them liked that. What's funny? Mark asked sharply. I shook my head. It's just interesting. My mother frowned. What is? I looked at both of them. You keep saying this is about helping me, I said. But everything you've mentioned tonight benefits you. My mother's face tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? Mark pushed his chair back slightly. Look, he said. Maybe Dad moved too fast. That surprised me. For a second, I thought he might actually be taking my side, but then he continued. Maybe the documents were a little aggressive. A little? I said. Yeah, he shrugged. But the idea itself isn't wrong. Of course it wasn't. Not to him. You want money for your business, I said. He didn't deny it. That's called investment. It's called asking. Mark's expression hardened. You're acting like we're strangers. No, I replied quietly. I'm acting like the only person here who understands whose money it is. My mother stood up from the table suddenly. I can't listen to this anymore. She walked toward the kitchen and started gathering plates, even though most of the food was barely touched. Mark watched her for a second before turning back to me. You know Dad's not going to drop this, he said. I shrugged slightly. He doesn't have to. What's that supposed to mean? It means I already made my decision. Mark stared at me for a long moment. You're really not going to share any of it? The way he said the word share made my chest tighten. Sharing implies generosity, I said calmly. Tonight was about expectations. That's how families work. No, I said quietly. That's how entitlement works. His jaw tightened. You think you're better than us now? The question hung in the air. For a moment, I actually felt sad. Mark, I said gently. I never thought that. Then why are you acting like this? Because tonight showed me something. And what's that? I looked around the dining room, the same room where we'd had birthdays, holidays, and dozens of ordinary family dinners over the years. But tonight, it didn't feel familiar anymore. It felt transactional. It showed me that none of you trust me, I said. That's not true. You called a family meeting the moment you heard about the money. That's normal. No, I replied. Normal would have been saying congratulations. He didn't respond. My mother returned to the dining room holding a stack of plates. Her eyes looked slightly red. Your father is very hurt, she said quietly. Isaihu. I didn't hurt him. Yes, you did. How? By refusing to listen. I leaned back in my chair. I listened, I said. I just didn't agree. She shook her head slowly. You don't understand how much pressure he's under. That made me pause. Pressure from what? She hesitated. Then she said something that made the entire evening suddenly make more sense. The house isn't doing well, she admitted. I frowned. What does that mean? The mortgage, she said quietly. It's getting difficult. Mark looked annoyed that she had said it out loud. But my mother continued, "Your father thought maybe this could help." My chest tightened slightly. For the first time all night, I saw something real in her expression. Not manipulation, fear, but something still didn't feel right. "If that's the case," I said carefully, "why didn't he just tell me that?" Neither of them answered, because we all knew the truth. If the meeting had been about help, it would have started very differently. Instead, it started with control. Mark stood up from his chair. "So what happens now?" he asked.